ChatGPT said, "You ever see someone's life turn inside out in less than a minute, right in front of a crowd?" Because that's exactly how it started for me that afternoon at Morrison University, when I was on stage giving a guest lecture about racial bias in law enforcement, a topic, ironically enough, I never thought would come crashing down on my own head. At least not like this. One minute I'm holding the room, students leaning forward, a few even nodding along. Next thing, those big double doors at the back slam open with a sound that makes everybody flinch, and two cops walk in like they own the place. Sunlight cutting around their uniforms. "Step away from the podium, ma'am," the taller one barks. And just like that, the air in the room goes cold. I stayed right where I was, my hands on the edge of the podium, feeling the grain of the wood under my fingers. 43 years old, decades of work behind me. And for the first time in a while, I wondered how many folks in this room would remember anything I'd said after today. My blouse was cream, my blazer navy, hair pulled tight, nothing flashy, just professional. But I'll never forget the silence that followed his command, how it cracked across the auditorium like glass. Some students thought it was a prank, others pulled out their phones, because you know how it is now. Everything gets filmed. I looked straight at him and asked, "Is there a reason you're interrupting this session?" My voice was calm, but inside, my mind was racing ahead, running through every possible outcome. The older officer, Dunlap, his name tag said, didn't answer. The younger one, Torres, looked nervous, but followed Dunlap's lead. "You're under arrest," Dunlap said. "Step down now." People gasped. Some students started recording. A faculty member just stood by the exit, unsure whether to get involved. "For what charge?" I asked, refusing to step down. "You haven't read me anything." Torres came up behind me, reaching for my wrist, repeating his order to turn around. I only turned my head and repeated my question. "You'll get your answers downtown," Dunlap said, grabbing my other wrist, snapping on the cuffs, cold, tight, humiliating, and that was it. In front of 200 kids, I was paraded out like a criminal, my pulse steady but my mind sharper than ever, because what they didn't know was they just made the worst mistake of their careers. Out in the hallway, students trailed behind, voices rising. "She didn't do anything." Phone still rolling. I could feel my jaw tense as we passed the quad, the heat of their stares pressing into my back. At the patrol car, Dunlap forced me in, the hard plastic divider digging into my knees, sweat sticking my blouse to my back. He looked at me in the rear view and said, "Crazy how easy that was." Torres even laughed, waving a little plastic bag in my face. White powder, probably baking soda for all I knew, but that's how they wanted it to look. "Found this in your bag," Torres sneered. "That wasn't there a minute ago," I said, meeting his eyes. "You sure about that?" he replied, acting like he'd caught a master criminal. The city blurred by outside as we drove, coffee shops and students fading into the distance. The Bridgeport PD was a squat, ugly building with buzzing lights and the smell of burnt coffee and Clorox. Inside, they led me to the intake desk, the board officer barely glancing up. "Name?" he asked, and I just waited a second, let my gaze drift over the mess on his desk, paperwork everywhere, a best grandpa ever mug, a fingerprint scanner covered in smudges. "You didn't check my ID," I finally said. "We will once you're in the system," he grunted. Dunlap chuckled. "She's trying to act smart. College types." But when my name finally popped up on his screen, the mood changed, his brows knit, his fingers froze over the keyboard, and he turned to the captain. Captain Mason was a big man, silver at the temples, uniform sharp, but eyes tired in a way that said he'd seen too much and fixed too little. The second he saw my name, he stopped, lips tightening as he looked back and forth between me and the computer. "Put her in interview too," he said sharply, ignoring Dunlap's protests. "Do you want to keep your badge?" Mason snapped, and that was the end of the discussion. Inside the interview room, pale green walls and a steel table, I sat cuffed and silent. They sent in a public defender, David Keller, a good guy, looked exhausted, like someone who used to believe in the system before it chewed him up. "Miss Fields," he said, "I've been assigned to represent you." He tried to talk plea deals, clean record, first-time charge, maybe we can work something out. But I told him flat, they planted it. He sighed, not believing me, but not wanting to say it out loud. "You're not just some guest lecturer, are you?" he finally asked. I didn't answer, just let the silence stretch. Because sometimes silence says more than any speech. Back in holding, time crawled. The women in the cell with me didn't speak. They knew the rules, knew how fast words could be twisted. Then a young officer called my name. He was nervous, respectful, probably signed up thinking he could change the world. Let me do another interview room, different this time, with a big mirror and a courthouse badge clipped to Keller's suit. They're pushing for intent to distribute, Keller warned. They have the bag, I replied. That bag was never mine. We argued, quietly but firmly, until he finally admitted, something's off. This feels rushed, like someone wanted it buried fast. Then he asked who I really was. I didn't answer, just looked him in the eye and waited until he felt uncomfortable. Did you run my name? I finally said. He nodded. Your record's flagged. Sealed clearance. Never seen anything like it. Just then, Captain Mason walked in, file in hand. She doesn't exist, he said quietly. Not in any database. Not even a birth certificate. He ran my name through a different channel, Homeland Interface. When he came back, he looked at me differently. She's Deputy Director, Internal Affairs, DOJ, he announced, his voice almost shaking. Suddenly, everyone in that room realized the tables had turned, and they weren't holding a suspect. They were sitting with a reckoning. The hallway outside was dead silent now. No more laughter, just tension. I walked with my head up, cuffs gone, blazer wrinkled, but my back straight. Dunlap and Torres waited outside the captain's office, faces stuck somewhere between arrogance and panic. I stepped past them without a word. Mason handed me my file, said he'd gone through a friend in D.C. Want to tell me who approved the arrest? I asked. Routine patrol, he answered, eyes dropping. Someone called in suspicious activity. Dispatch sent it to Dunlap's unit. I pressed, and the drugs. I don't know, he whispered. You run a department where 2 of your officers planted evidence on a federal official in broad daylight, and never thought they'd be caught. That's not clean. That's rotten. If I don't walk out of here in 5 minutes, Internal Affairs will burn this place to the ground, I told him, and he believed me. He called in Dunlap and Torres. You're here for your final 5 minutes, I said, looking them in the eye. Dunlap scoffed, but his confidence died when Mason shut the door and told him to sit. Outside, the precinct was watching, some officers looking away, others too afraid to meet my eyes. Then a man in a black suit arrived, credentials ready. We're here to take you home, ma'am. I walked out past the desks, past the stairs, straight into the back of a black SUV. Nobody tried to stop me. Not anymore. At the federal building. The air was sharp. People stood at attention, agents stepping aside as I passed. Upstairs, the Attorney General and Director of Internal Affairs were waiting. You've caused a mess, Director Fields, the AG said. No, I exposed one, I replied. The Internal Affairs Director explained, the officers have confessed planning drugs, taking bribes, coercing witnesses. The prosecutor is under investigation. The whole department is coming down. This is bigger than Bridgeport, the AG said. You've just turned a small incident into a national scandal. He looked at me. You realize the enemies you're making? If they fear justice, they were never on the right side, I said. Cameras were already waiting. I took the podium, voice steady. This is not just about my arrest. It's about a system that targets the vulnerable, protects misconduct, and punishes the truth. That ends now. And as I walked off that stage, the noise of reporters, flashes of cameras, none of it mattered as much as the silence that came after, the kind that only falls when walls start to crack. Justice isn't an event, it's a fight. And for the first time in a long time, the system was bleeding daylight. So, you tell me, was it justice? Was it revenge? Or was it just one more fight in a world that keeps spinning? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about what's right, what's wrong, and what it's going to take to fix the messes we're all living in.